Okay, Jen and I are so happy to be talking with Tina Quinn today as we always think through like the levers that help us feel better now and in the long haul, and this idea of powering up our high half. Jen and I frame these episodes somewhere in one of our five pillars. So it's just a refresher. It's movement, sleep, nourishment, community, and then the fifth pillar kind of around beyond. Today, when we talk with Tina, Tina is a high impact executive coach. She comes to that work from a myriad of super cool careers, which she's going to describe to us. And she sits right in the middle of kind of the beyond as well as the community component of those five levers. And she's got just really practical and actionable ways to help kind of rewire your brain to get the biggest joy bang for your buck in your high half. So without further ado, let's dive in. All right, Jen, we're so excited today because we have our guest, Tina Quinn, with us. And I got to meet Tina in the context of her executive coaching work when she was relocating from Los Angeles to Park City. But what is just so inspiring to me about Tina, and those of you who are watching on YouTube will get to experience this, not only is she just a presence of light in her physical embodiment, but she also just exudes light in the way she leads conversations and dialogues. She has been an inspiration in the myriad of work and career paths she's explored and succeeded in, and then navigated life kind of, I think, iconically as embodying what midlife can be about and powering up your high half. So without any further ado, welcome Tina Quinn.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here with the two of you. I find you both so inspiring, and it really is an honor to have been through where you are, the people that you're communicating with right now. Um, and I'm on the other side of that since I'm 63 years old, and I feel like you're sitting in the middle of this chunk of richness, and I can't wait to talk to you about it.
Awesome.
Well, we're so excited that you're here. Thank you. I know every time I don't get to spend enough time with you, but every time I do, I'm enlightened and encouraged and motivated. And so you definitely have this spirit about you that is so uplifting. And so I just can't wait to dive in and even for myself to learn more about your story and how you got to now and just the journey.
Good. Don't you
Awesome.
just want me to take it away?
Yeah,
You want to ask
Absolutely.
me
tell
some
us how you got here
questions?
now. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, well, it has been a circuitous route. So, I have this great cartoon sketch that I sometimes send to my clients. So, just to preface it, I'm an executive coach. I work in personal and professional, in the personal and professional space. So, I call myself a life and leadership coach. Um, I became a coach at 52. And so I am kind of the quintessential reinvention of yourself. I've done it many times.
Yes.
And, I wrote about it in a book that I ended up writing in 2019. But my dad died when I was young. And I kind of went off the rails for 5 years trying to figure out what I was doing. And then I came back, but I experimented with different careers and different passions. Um, Off the rails is too extreme. But at the time I was working for Bullock's department store, which I got after I graduated from college. Then I left there and I moved and I started a travel agency for a scuba diving
So cool.
store. Then I went and I came back and I got into commercial real estate. And then I got married and we moved to Northern California and I started a nonprofit organization because I started refining along the way what were my interests. And I recognized kind of in my mid 20s after I had done commercial real estate for a while that what I cared about was the environment. And I happened to coincidentally meet somebody very high up in real estate, and he had a friend who was leaving the Nature Conservancy as its president. They were coming together to form a new nonprofit. And at the time, I had moved my real estate business to buying land for hiking trails. in the Santa Monica Mountains. And so we started an organization called Sustainable Conservation together. I was kind of the 27-year-old runner. From there, I got married. We moved Sustainable Conservation to San Francisco. I started an import-export company because I was having babies there. Then I went and got my Lamaze certification. We moved back to the US, back to LA. I started teaching Lamaze, but I was still involved in the environment. And I ended up getting really involved in our school district. We lived in Palos Verdes because our third daughter, we have three girls, they're 31, 28, and 25. Our third daughter was born with an intellectual disability. At the time, we didn't know what it was, but it turns out we found out about when she was 10 years old that she's missing a part of a chromosome. So I got involved in the school district so that I could support her, but also support the other kids. I started a nonprofit in the environment for the school district to start gardens. And then I got involved in UCLA and started their environmental science program there. And it's called the Institute of the Environment and Sustainability. And I became board chair there. And then when our second daughter left to go to college, I decided I wanted to do something different. I had managed real estate that the family owned, so I had a professional career, and I had been involved in boards and starting companies and selling them, and so I became a coach. And so at 52, which is kind of the middle probably of where most of your audience is living, I started questioning my beliefs. I started questioning everything. And here I am today, 11 years later. Our youngest daughter, finished up at the school district in Palos Verdes, and so we needed to find a program for her. And we found one in Provo. And so John was no longer working, and I could work from anywhere. And so we moved to Park City. She was living on site. We thought for sure we'd see her all the time. And we are almost 4 years later. She is done with the program, and next week she will move into an apartment on her own for the first time ever.
Wow,
and
so great.
I'm both terrified and proud, so proud of all of our daughters.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is a really long
That's such a
recap
beautiful journey.
of,
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question because I think, and some of this is just for personal advice from me. Yeah. Having done a major career shift in my mid 40s, and it was terrifying, and some of it was by choice and some of it was not. And how did you find the courage to kind of reinvent yourself and start things new so many different times? I think that is such a skill that people have. And I know I don't have it. Like, that is a terrifying thought for me. And then I hear people like yourself who have just done it magically and successfully. And and I'm in awe. I really am. I'm in awe of the courage that takes. And I think that a lot of women that we talk to, especially in this phase of life, are ready to take that step and just there is something holding them back. And so how did you approach each of those changes?
It's such a good question, Jen, because it's so critical in allowing ourselves to fully grow into the people that this journey is supposed to be about. When we feel like we are a certain way, we've got a definition, it's almost like we put a little yellow sticky on our heads and we say, this is who I am, and anything besides that isn't okay, is scary, and all of those things may be true. But what you're doing with each of those thoughts, each of those gifts, you're listening to something that's deeper than the way you've been operating. So this idea that we're reinventing ourselves is, the truth is we're always reinventing ourselves. We invented ourselves in the beginning, right? We were socialized a certain way. This is how you're supposed to do it. You need, I coach a lot of people that have gone through school and then they get they're top of their class in college, and then they go on and they work for Goldman Sachs, and they go on and they create these incredibly successful careers. And by the time they come to me, they're 47, they're 50, they're 52, where I was. And it doesn't hit the mark, right? It did for a long time. And as I was thinking about this talk and talking to you too, what I really realize is, and we can read about it in books, but as women, we are experiencing it during menopause, where we have spent our lives kind of focused on our bodies, focused on our mind, creating the careers, whatever we were doing, or staying home, or whatever we had chosen. But our hormones help us to create the next phase of who we are to become. And we can be scared of that and continue to move with our intuition even while we're scared. Because what begins to happen is, if we wait too long, right, we're getting all these nudges along the way, right? At 47, you get literally a push to do something different. Both of you were kind of ready, but not really. But now here you are. And so it becomes an opportunity to get to know yourself again.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think of it not as courage, but as a curiosity and a willingness to follow nudges. I call it intuition. And honestly, when I was thinking about what I could share with your audience, and you too, I think that that's a gift that is a skill that we don't practice. We're busy raising kids. We're busy developing our businesses. We're busy creating enough stability in our lives and solidifying our ego, that the next half, if we're lucky, we are listening to our intuition and allowing that be the voice that guides us more than what society has told us what to do.
Yeah.
Does that feel helpful at all?
Yeah. Well,
Yes.
yes. And I love in that, as you describe intuition as this catalyst, or, your powerhouse for this, what Jen and I call the high half. It's a habit or an exercise or a skill set. It can be a tangible practice, so the idea that you try every day to get reconnected to intuition, to get out of your cerebral, everybody's overdeveloped their cerebral processing at this point, right? We know how to
That's right.
multitask, even though we know it's not good for us. We know how to do it, and we know how to run after things and schedule and plan and,
Right.
parallel process. But to get the practice of intuition embedded, I love that you frame that as the action you can practice, right? It's a tangible check in and say, just put on offer a question to yourself and hear your answer, and get used to that idea of hearing your own answer.
And recognizing how much our intuition has guided us to where we are today. And we've overridden it so many times when we think that's not practical, that's not. So I guess I would frame it in, it doesn't require courage to listen more deeply. It requires practice only. And I think we have an idea. I mean, I happen to come by it naturally that I like the adventure part, and I'm so intensely curious about what's on the other side. But when Megan was 3, and I had a 3-year-old, a 6-year-old, and an 8-year-old, she cried all the time. And I ate healthy, and I slept, and I exercised, and I was engaged in community. I felt like I had done everything I could. And I had a friend who was a meditator. And I was like, you know what? I just got to try it. I got to try it. I don't have anywhere else to turn, and I'm desperate. And I was 39, I think, at the time. And I started with 5 minutes. And what I did was I focused on a rock, and I went outside. We were living in California. I went outside, and I literally took the rock because I had no skills. I literally took the rock, and my only goal for 5 minutes, I set a timer. It was before iPhones, right? So I set a timer, and you can even use your hand, right? But I just focused on the details of the rock. Or now I have a crystal sitting on my desk. I can hold the crystal, and I can be fascinated by the divots in the crystal for just 5 minutes. And every time I thought about the grocery list, or when I had to pick the kids up, I literally would come back to the details of the rock. Mm-hmm. And so I made a commitment to John, because I was never getting angry with Megan, but I was getting angry, frustrated. It wasn't even angry. My fuse was so short. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about all of you. You're probably navigating parents. You're navigating kids, which is where I was. It was just, my brain felt like it was going to pop. Mm-hmm. And so what that allowed me to do, just those 5 minutes, was to get out of my head, Lindsley, like you said, and into the present moment. Because when you're having a hot flash, the worst part is you think it's going to last forever, and you cannot believe you're sweating, and it's too much. Or the middle of the night, you wake up and you feel like you're never going to go back to sleep. You've got this, and everything's going on, right? And it feels like it's going to last forever. But that's the beauty. Nothing lasts forever. Grief doesn't last forever. Laughter doesn't last forever. It's just not who we are as human beings. So if I have one thing to impart, it is truly that we are these fluid beings, and things don't stick. They go through, and just like careers, let's see what's underneath the next one. Okay.
Love that. I think that's so interesting, because I think it's very easy and somewhat comfortable to have these, you were talking about kind of the post-it on your head about who you are and what you are. And there's comfort in that, right? Because there's identity, there's consistency, there is predictability in I am mom, I am partner, I am doctor, I am these things. And I know every time that I take one of those off, or even rearrange the order, I feel like sometimes it is okay. And even if it's what I want, I think we have these pressures in society. I mean, when I left my clinical practice, my kids looked at me, and they were old enough to understand. I mean, it was just a couple years ago. And they're like, well, what do we call you now if you're not a doctor? It's like, well, I'm still a doctor.
It turns out I could do that forever.
And so I think that a lot of times, while it is exciting, we get this external feedback that is sometimes unsolicited to say, well, how are you going to define yourself now? You are doctor, you are athlete, you are this, you are that. And now you've taken those labels off or rearranged them. What are you doing? And so how do you encourage people to not only listen to that intuition, but be able to act on it in the face of all of these other messaging coming to them saying, wow, what are you doing? How can you do this? When it, like in your heart, like I felt many times, like, I don't want to practice medicine in the way I am anymore. Like, I'm ready for this. But I'm not ready to answer all of these questions, so I'm just going to keep going a little bit longer.
Right. So what would you have answered if you were being real?
I think I don't know if I know the answer to that question right off the top of my head. I mean, I think the first thing that comes to mind is I have lost my passion for what I do. And I know I can take these skills and rediscover that in a different environment. But I am not a risk taker. And so I think that was a big part of me. Like I had this voice saying, you could use this in other areas. You could actually, instead of taking care of one person at a time, you could reach hundreds or thousands of people, etc. But I was really scared. And I think that I was scared to take that risk because I had such stability. And I needed that stability for my family. Like, my family was dependent on my income as well, like all of these things. And so I think that the nudges were there, but it was really hard to act and trust those nudges, especially in the face of all of this external noise coming back to me.
So what I'm actually hearing is you did it at the perfect time. The external pressures kept you safe until it was no longer enough. And that's kind of how we all operate. Everybody's got a different place Lindsley's constantly changing like I am, right? Yes. But everybody's got a different line. And the truth is, in my practice, I moved from speaking primarily about helping my clients to navigate their business, make more money, work with their boards. And now I am really owning the space of, I've done mind, I've done body. What does spirit look like? And so in my practice, here's my book.
Yes, Invisible Things. I love it.
Invisible Things.
Love your book.
We're gonna
perfect.
Tag that
we're gonna
for
talk
everyone.
about
yes, I love
it. But I'm really embracing. It's scary. In my book, I wrote about things that I was mortified about. And all I could think of was my goal in the second half of life is how can I make this world a happier place, a better place for everybody. And so what does that take from me? And so I think that line of safety and, our identity with more spiritual work, with more questioning, is that really me, right? Am I mom? My kid, my 31-year-old, I remember her saying when she was 12, I can't wait to be 21 so we can have a glass of wine together. At 12. So now at 31, I'm trying not to be her parent and parent her. That doesn't serve our relationship. So this idea of mom identity is very different with a 31-year-old. I'm now friend. And I call her up when I want to decide if I want an outfit or not, right? So I think these identities, the older we get, we begin to say, what else is there, right? Like as we go through hot flashes, as we're up in the middle of the night, as we're trying to navigate another 50 years of life, what's in us? And you only do it when you're ready. And what I tell my clients is everybody has a different line of safety. And until you're ready to make a move, but I have a client right now, she's a consultant. When she hired me, she wanted to become a coach. And I said, hold on, you're supporting your 2 kids. You're trying to buy a house. She's 36 years old. And that's the priority right now. Yeah, you want to be a coach, but you're looking at years before you're making the same income. So her line needs to be somewhere different.
I think one of the things that you touched on, Tina, and Jen was one of the first to really make me aware of this with her doctor hat on, is that our our neurochemistry does support this, right? Like, you know, and so I'm going to ask Jen for you to dialogue with Tina about this, because I think the two of you come at this idea that it is this cohort of midlife is situational, and it is, you know, individual, and we all live in different communities and have different needs, but there is some underlying chemistry that's at play, and it gives you some peace that it's part of it is just the natural evolution of our internal body systems that's framing us up. Like in Japan, postmenopause is a rite of passage, and it's celebrated, and that chemistry is celebrated. So I guess my question would be to Dr. Jen to tell us a little bit about that. And then Tina's got the coaching, you know, connection and how that does support spirituality and mindset
Yeah,
shifting in that role.
absolutely. No, I mean, it was part of, I think it was one of the most, and still is the most fascinating parts of this journey for me, is to continue to dive into like really the neuroscience and neurobiology about what is happening to our brains as we age and go through these transitions, especially with hormones. You know, I think it's female physiology is fascinating in the fact that the amount of change that we go through in very short periods of time, and whether that is going through puberty when you were younger, if people have chosen to experience pregnancy, those changes, and then going through menopause is, you know, it is over a lifespan, a relatively short period of time to have that much change in your body. And so you know, this whole idea of when we start to lose estrogen and progesterone in our brains, and how it really does lead to rewiring and these biologically innate behaviors that those hormones contribute to, our caregiving, our nurturing, you know, this idea when you're pregnant and those hormones are skyrocketing, this nesting behavior that you just are like, all of a sudden you're like, this isn't me. Why am I creating these nests? You know, it's like this amazing thing that just starts happening. And I think I'm grateful, and Tina, everything that you've talked about with this idea of accepting those nudges. And I think it's just so fascinating that we're accepting those nudges in the time that our brain chemistry is also saying, I am ready to receive them. I don't need to play this caregiver role anymore. And I really don't want to. Like I've that part of that hormonal influence is gone. And I am really happy about that at this point. You know, I don't feel this biological need to do these things anymore. And in fact, I have to like really consciously focus to do things that used to come naturally in those areas. And so I do think that that's really neat, and how I would love your opinion on how this idea of spirituality and finding our purpose and belonging to something bigger feeds into that, when all of a sudden we actually have more cognitive, I would say, I wouldn't say more, but our cognitive capacity to do some of these things is hormonally shifting, because we don't feel as imprinted to do some of these things biologically and physiologically that we were when we had these hormones. And now that these hormones are decreasing, we're making all of these new neural connections and developing this new neuroplasticity to give us the bandwidth to explore new areas.
It's so beautiful, right? How it's the ingenious design of this universe that brings it all together, and we can listen or not. And it doesn't really, it's okay, whatever we choose to do. You know, I think there's so much, you know, I'm at a phase right now where there's so much, because I'm all the way through, right? This transition time of, you know, kids and parents and work and, um, you know, friendships. And it's all kind of in turmoil as you try and figure out what's next. And I think that the spiritual piece, like I said, we focus so much on mind and body, and we're not really sure how to focus on spirit, what that actually looks like. And I think as we go to the second half of life, what the opportunity is to, I would say, what's been key for me along this journey is that I had some illusion of control when I was younger, when I had
Yes,
kids.
yes.
I had some idea
Good for
that
you.
all
I
my
don't have any illusions about
I love it. When I was younger, I did that. I did too. I did too.
this has gone out the window,
Yeah.
this house.
Midlife kicks it right out of you.
exactly. And then, then I have Megan, but I still had this great illusion of I was managing and my schedule mattered and my agenda and my goals and everything else. And what I really feel right now is the skill that menopause helps us develop and this kind of middle life, right? Between 45 and 65. What we're learning is the skill of adaptability because predictability goes out the window for most of us when we go through menopause. Nothing's predictable. Your brain feels scrambled. You cannot believe you went out the door and you left your keys in the house again, right? And so I think where it's so powerful and so helpful at this stage is that your brain is primed to introduce another way of operating. And that way of operating is flexibility, adaptability, generosity, forgiveness, all of these things we talk about. And, there was a great book written by a coach called Loving What Is. And essentially, Mel Robbins just came out with Let Them,
Which is
right? Which is kind of this.
It's Byron Katie's book already. Right? It is. Yes.
Right? So
Yeah.
Let Them is kind of let them, let me. Byron Katie's book is loving what is and how do we see what is
Yes.
and be okay with what is and decide how we want to operate. And that's what the essence of spirituality to me is.
I think, because one of the things that I think is beautiful in the conversation is letting go of control doesn't mean letting go of agency and letting go of accountability. It is this idea of being flexible with the outcome, that you still show up engaged and with a sense of ownership, but what you released from is the requirement that the outcome hits your expectations, right?
Oh, I love that.
Beautiful.
And that I think
Beautiful.
that to me was the nuance of where I was shifting, because you play with it. You're like, am I abdicating? No, I'm not. I'm still showing up for life, but I'm not requiring that life serve the results I expect in order for me to keep showing up.
Exactly. And I think a key piece of this is boundaries. I think that when we begin to listen to our intuition and somebody says, hey, do you want to go out for drinks? And it would be really fun to go out with a group of people or go out hiking but I know that tomorrow I've got a full work day and that's going to tap my resources, right? I know I need to say no. So, and saying no becomes easier and easier. But I think that I thought you said it so beautifully, Lindsley, because yeah, it is, you continue to show up as powerfully and clear every single time. But the outcome is the outcome. And
I love this. And two things I want to, one is a question for both of you that the person that kind of introduced me to spirituality is Reverend Sue, who we've had on. And, she asked me some really hard questions, the hardest questions I think I've ever faced in my life. And I've faced a lot of hard questions. What are your, both of you, I would love for you both to answer this. I think that this is for people that are not familiar with spirituality or haven't accessed that as part of their life and part of their routines and their systems and how they operate. What questions, if you had to pick two questions to start having this internal conversation with yourself about what is my purpose? How am I going to respond to these nudges? What two questions, how do you start this conversation? Because it's kind of an internal conversation a lot of the time. What are your two favorite questions for people to say, I'm ready to start thinking about this? I'm just not quite sure how to start thinking about this.
Well, I'll start because I'll let Tina have a second.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot, but I
No,
really
I
think it's
love
like,
it. Are you
how do
kidding?
we
That's great.
tell people that are in this phase, women that want to access this, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah, I think one question that I like to start with, it's relative to spirituality as well as just permission to be in your midlife journey, is this idea of what will it take for you to believe that you deserve the gift of the best life you can lead. And the reason I frame it like that is that there are so many voices we all have in our heads, whether it was, I have to perform to get a positive comment from my family. I have to be better than to get paid what I'm worth. I have to be perfect parent to raise the child that was born. Whatever those voices are, if you break down that question into what will it take for you to believe that just by being on this earth in this moment of life, you've already earned the birthright to enjoy life. That doesn't mean at the expense of somebody else, but you actually do have the birthright to savor and enjoy your life. What will it take for you to really believe and be in that truth?
Mm-hmm.
Is my first question.
It's beautiful. To start, I would say look back at your life and where did you listen to a gut instinct? That's how I would start.
I think that's great.
Because I really think we listen to our intuition. And, I operate that there's a universal life force, there's God, there's source energy, whatever we call it, that creates nature, that creates this life that we live. So we are not alone on this journey. And I think that when you begin to notice your intuition, when you get that nudge to call a friend, or you feel like your kid's out and just a little bit too long, or your parent, or your partner, or you feel like, so it helps to know that you already have it in you. You don't have to do anything different. But I would highly recommend that if you're curious, create silence in your life, even if it's 5 minutes, and allow yourself to see what shows up. And there's great apps now, but really to give yourself the gift of curiosity about you. You've been so concerned about the outside and goals and everything else. So if you start just by being curious,
Mm-hmm.
that's where I would start. Does that feel helpful?
I think that's incredibly helpful. And I think some of the way you both have framed things about maintaining agency, having boundaries, and even having your own personal safety line, I feel like sometimes these conversations are hard for people who, all of us sometimes, who still have very real commitments, right? Like we have mortgages to pay and we have we have expectations, etc. And so I feel like sometimes this conversation gets so far the other direction that it's like we're just going to dance in the park and forget all of our responsibilities, right? And so I think framing it in a way that is, it's not the right time for you to be a coach. You have too many responsibilities and the gap is too large from where you are to where you need to be to do that right now. I think that's a great piece of advice. It's not saying you're never going to be a coach, but let's think about the right timing in the space where you are and the responsibilities that you have and figure out when the right time is. And it's not, don't listen to that intuition, but let's put that intuition into kind of a realistic framework. And I love that approach even with spirituality. Maybe this is my scientific analytical mind, but it is saying, okay, let's look back at when I trusted my gut and what happened. Most of the time it works out, right? And so it gives you the confidence to say, I'm good. And now I can be curious. I think just having that framework to me, even just sitting here, I'm like, oh, I can now go do, maybe reflect on some things that I've kind of kept down because I wasn't quite sure what to do with them.
I think another side of that intuitive voice that is sometimes harder to listen to, and it's when are you tempted to numb? And so in
Mm-hmm.
your life, when are you reaching for a distraction or whatever it is that you reach for to silence something else that's happening inside your internal dialogue?
Mm-hmm.
That is
Mm-hmm.
also a glimmer. It's not as comfortable as the glimmer that might be telling you to go outside and go walk for a minute because you need to get some sunshine, but it is also your intuition telling you something is out of alignment. And it doesn't mean you have to address it that second, but when you have those moments of silence, that is as compelling and can be as insightful about what is it that I'm out of alignment on, and writing that
Yeah.
down too.
I think those are all such beautiful and yet implementable tactics to start to become confident in listening to those nudges and to develop maybe a sense of trust with yourself that you have not let yourself develop previously. That I think can be super powerful as things are changing and developing, and as we're changing and developing into this next phase of life that and Lindsay, I always appreciate you reframing things, and we've had this conversation a gazillion times about reframing things with joy, because I agree, we sometimes or oftentimes say, if I'm happy and experiencing joy, I'm not working, like it's at the expense of something else, instead of just embracing that, no, I'm actually happy and this is okay.
Yeah.
And I have a right to be happy.
Yeah. And there's a fundamental belief in spirituality, I think, in Tina's work. She's like, your spirituality source, whatever you name it, wants you to be happy. They're rooting for that. They're rooting for your side. It's not a penalty cost. It's like that is actually, whatever you think of that energy, that if they're giving this gift of life, the idea is to enjoy that gift,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I go ahead.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make sure because I want, Tina, you had held up your book, but we didn't say the name of it for people who are not on YouTube. But can you just take a moment and tell us and our people who are listening, the Midlife Women here, how they find you and how they connect with you for coaching, or connect with you for your book, or connect with you for whatever is on offer?
Well, thank you. The book is called Invisible Things. The most important things in life are the ones you can't see. In it, I have a step-by-step way of how I started meditation. I wrote it almost 10 years ago, so my meditation is substantially different. But it's also how these stories I told myself for so long, I was able to question the beliefs I had. And it was pretty powerful transformation when I saw what was possible, when I questioned everything I believed, whether it was from my dad or from my husband, right? And tinaquinn.com. And please reach out, send me a note if you want. I'm happy to be in communication. And what I know for sure is that it's a hard and exciting time, this menopause stage. And you asked me for 5 thoughts. Can I give 5 ideas?
Please.
I love what you said, Jen, and what you said, Lindsley, because laugh. Find occasions to laugh. Watch silly movies. Remember that it's in you, even as the chaos is swirling around you. See if you can find that stillness somewhere. And if you're religious, it comes in that awareness that God is in you. If religion isn't your thing, it is that divine part of you that exists. Give yourself an opportunity to know that the next phase of life includes a lot more of that if you give it space. When you mess up, what I tell my clients and what I tell myself is, I'm just a cute little human doing the best I can. And I get another chance to try again. And even if I blow up a job or I blow up a relationship, I really am trying the best I can. And I can only do it with the tools I have. And so it gives you an opportunity to give yourself some grace. Try to create awe. There's a great book out right now
Yes.
by Dr. Keltner, and it's called Awe. Find occasions to have awe in your life, even when you're watching a television show that somebody is created. It's or the snow or the sunlight on the water, or it doesn't have to cost any money, but just that flash of an instant reminds you that we're all connected. And I was talking to my husband about pointers, and he had two, so I'm just going to share those. I realize that's six.
That's bonus. We get a bonus.
He says, try to be aware when you're interrupting somebody else that's talking. Allow them space to finish their idea before you jump in. And I work with a lot of people on being right. This idea of being right. We have the right answer. We know the right way to do something. Everybody is seeing through different eyes, and you don't always have to be right. You want a good, healthy relationship, and particularly if you have a partner or kids or parents, allow them to be right too. It's okay. So those are my pointers.
Fantastic.
Tina, thank you.
Tina.
This has been
Love
just
seeing you too.
an enlightening and uplifting conversation and educational. I mean, all the things. It's going to take me a little while to process all of this, but thank you for giving us your time and your wisdom and sharing your journey with us. Just really, from the bottom of my heart, I appreciate you sharing and helping us navigate this phase.
It is my honor and my pleasure, and I think what you're doing is so exciting, and I just wish I had found the two of you when I was 47 or 52 or whatever age.
We're lucky we found you.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Really grateful for the two of you on this space and world.
Wow, that is just so energizing every time we get to hear from Tina, but especially today to have covered the breadth of ideas. So just to boil it down for us, Tina left us with 6 tips to really get the most, as I said in the introduction, the biggest joy bang for your buck in your high half. To laugh, to find some stillness every day. I guess all of these every day. To treat yourself and your community and the world around you with a sense of grace. To go out and seek the moments of awe, even in the ordinary. To be mindful that when you're in dialogue, to kind of fight the urge to interrupt and to really give space for the whole conversation to unfold and listening to the person and you're in partnership with and communication. And then lastly, to find peace and patience and letting go of the idea of being right. That creates space for the relationship without the black and white dynamics that are so polarizing and divisive in our day-to-day. So thank you for joining us today. And we hope if you liked this, that you share it with more midlife women so we can reach more people who are navigating this cohort of midlife and powering up this high half. Like and share and subscribe and all the things. And mostly we just hope we get to talk with you again next week. Until then, enjoy, feel good now and the long haul, because it's time.